So welcome everyone to this week's edition of Impactful Teamwork. I just want to start today in a different note because I have just returned from the Reinvention Summit in Dublin, where I have been meeting with some reinvention practitioners that are colleagues of mine and have been learning more about reinvention and why reinvention is such an imperative for us to understand in today's climate. Now, as many of you will know, I've been talking for a long time about how we need to reinvent leadership for the 21st century. So that is something we're going to be diving into a little bit more today. But I want to start with some key facts and figures because some of the statistics shared, in fact, not some, most of the statistics shared at the conference absolutely blew my mind. And this is the first one I want to start with. 85% of business models will be obsolete within 5 years. Let me just say that again. 85% of business models will be obsolete within 5 years. And that's according to the Gartner Future Business Survey. So why does that matter? Why is it important that the business model is going to be changing? And why is it changing? The first reason is the innovation gap is accelerating. And Gartner reports that 63% of leaders say that innovation timelines are shrinking. And traditional models just can't keep up with the evolving customer expectations and technical advancements. Number two, AI is rewriting what value means. So more than 50% of professional services tasks will be automated by 2027, according to McKinsey. Again, just think about that. More than 50% of professional services tasks will be automated by 2027, according to McKinsey. So if your model relies on output alone, you're at risk. And thirdly, most strategies are reactive, not adaptive. And over 70% of leaders admit that they're stuck in outdated planning cycles, unable to respond fast enough to change, let alone anticipate it. So what does that mean for you? It means that your current business model, no matter how successful, likely has a short shelf life. It means disruption is no longer a threat, it's your daily operating system. And this is something we really delved into a lot at the Reinvention Summit in Dublin this week. Interestingly, what this means is that for some time, reinvention might have been seen as a luxury, but right now it's your only real competitive advantage in a market that is changing rapidly. And I think it's important to note here that reinvention isn't about starting from scratch. It's about building a system that continually evolves without burning out, losing clients, or getting left behind. And when we're looking at the best reinvention systems, they're ones that harness the great things from the past and pull those into the future and release all the things that were no longer serving us. So on today's podcast, I really want to talk about how we need to reinvent leadership for the 21st century and how and why leaders must evolve to thrive in chaos. Because I think we can all agree that in the fast changing, unpredictable world in which we live, leaders who thrive are not only those that rely on past successes or rigid structures or outdated playbooks. Instead, the leaders that are going to thrive in the new world need to be adaptive, forward-thinking, and continuously evolving their leadership. This is a model built on reinvention. And we need this reinvention of leadership right now because the traditional models of leadership were built for a stable and predictable world. The hierarchical structures, top-down decision-making, and long-term strategic plans worked in an era of slow-moving change. But in a world where we operate at an accelerated pace driven by technology, globalization, economic uncertainty, environmental shifts, and societal expectations, the old ways of leadership will no longer work. We're no longer in this stable, predictable world that we were in before. So here's some more data just to drive the point home for you. 60% of businesses report that they need to reinvent every 3 years or less. And this is some research that is done by the Academy of Reinventors, which is something that I'm part of. 1 of 3 public companies will cease to exist in their current form over the next 5 years. And that failure rate is now 6 times higher than it was 40 years ago. The average lifespan of an S&P 500 company has dropped from 33 years in 1964 to just 12 years in 2027, and that's projected. And a Harvard Business Review study found that 75% of business transformation failed, largely because we're still approaching change as a one-time initiative instead of an ongoing process. And one of the other statistics shared with us at the conference was that 5 to 10 years ago, companies typically went through 2 major transformations a year. That is now up to 10 major transformations a year. And this doesn't include all the side change projects that are happening around it. So one of the real dangers that we have in business right now is what we call Titanic Syndrome. And this is the danger of holding on to the past, where we think that if we cling to past success, that will make us successful in the future. And so what we do is we refuse to adapt, or we ignore emerging realities coming around the corner. So some examples, and we've talked about these previously on the podcast. Nokia ignored the shifts to smartphones. Kodak actually invented digital photography, but they failed to capitalize on it. And Blockbuster laughed at Netflix online streaming model. So each of those companies had the opportunity to reinvent, yet they chose stability over evolution, and they paid the price. And this same philosophy applies to leadership. If leaders fail to adapt, evolve, and reinvent their leadership approach, they risk becoming obsolete, just like the organizations they are leading. So how do we start reinventing leadership for the 21st century? And I want to suggest 5 ways that we do this for you. Because reinvention isn't solely a business strategy, it's actually a leadership mindset and a system. So ways that we need to approach reinventing leadership for the 21st century include: number 1, building a reinvention mindset and adopting nature's approach to leadership. So as many of you will know, I am a massive proponent of looking towards nature for solutions. And I believe that nature is the greatest teacher of reinvention. The seasons change, the system adapts, and animals evolve to new environments. So maybe as leaders, we should take inspiration from nature's cycles. So how about in winter? This is a time for reflection and renewal. This is a time for stepping back, assessing, and letting go of outdated methods. Spring, which is where we are now, is a time of growth and experimentation. It's a time for testing new strategies, encouraging creativity, and allowing fresh ideas to emerge. Then in the summer, we get to more execution and scaling, doubling down on what's working and building momentum. And then we move into the autumn, to the season of harvest and preparation, where we celebrate wins, document lessons, and prepare for the next reinvention cycle. So perhaps an idea for you is to think about how could you schedule quarterly seasons of leadership reviews, where you can assess what is needed, what do you need to let go of, what do you need to nurture, what do you need to start doing, what do you need to celebrate, what needs to be scaled. The second mindset shift we need when it comes to evolving our leadership thinking is shifting from managing stability to leading continuous change. Because I believe that as leaders, we can no longer afford to react to change. We've got to anticipate, design, and implement change. And so what does that mean? What are these shifts in our leadership thinking? In the old model, change was a one-time project. In our new paradigm of continual reinvention, change is a continuous system. It is always happening. In the old leadership model, it was all about top-down decision making. In the new reinvention model, it's about decentralized and empowered teams. In the old leadership model, we looked at rigid long-term plans. And in the new model, we are looking at agile adaptive strategies. And I might want to signpost you to a previous podcast we did on emergent strategies and planning with emergent strategies. In the old leadership model, it was all about risk avoidance. And nowadays, it's all about experimentation and calculated risk. And in our old leadership model, it was all about control and efficiency. And nowadays, it's about innovation and flexibility. So the third way is about how do we reimagine our leadership role? How do we become the chief reinvention officer of our business? We need to become the sort of leader who anticipates this change, designs new strategies, and implements the transformation continually. And there's 6 pillars of reinvention that we use within the Academy of Reinvention. And the first of those is anticipation. We need to actively scan for emerging trends before they become disruptions. And actually at the conference, we had Rita McGrath talking to us. Rita has written an incredible book called Seeing Around Corners. And this is exactly about how do we actively scan for these emerging trends before they become disruptions. The second pillar is all about experimentation. Testing new ideas rapidly, learning to fail fast and learn fast mindset. And experimentation is so important in business today. I can't tell you the number of businesses that I've observed and read about that have failed because they've striven for perfection. And when we're striving to perfection, when it comes to releasing a product or service, it never gets off the shelf. And then what happens is the competition takes over. And before we even have an opportunity to release that product or service, it's obsolete. So we live in a world of dynamic change. So it's so important that we learn to fail fast, which means we need to get into action and get things into play. The third pillar is all about collaboration. It's about breaking down these silos and encouraging cross-functional and cross-industry learning. And some of you will recall one of my biggest frustrations when I was working in the corporate world was this lack of collaboration and the way that one part of the organization didn't know what was happening in the other part of the organization. So we were replicating activities and wasting so much time, energy, and resources. The fourth pillar is all about sustainability. We have to lead with long-term adaptability in mind and not just short-term gains. And one of the big challenges that we're struggling with in business right now is this sort of instant gratification need that we've got. We want everything to happen now. We want immediate results. But what that sometimes means is we put in processes and systems that won't stay agile and adapt for the long term. The fifth pillar is all about resilience. It's about creating a culture that embraces uncertainty and sees change as an opportunity. So many people I talk to see change as a threat and something to be worried about. I have a very different perspective, and that's probably why I'm passionate about reinvention, because I do see change as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to do things differently, to improve systems, to improve processes. And finally, the sixth pillar is all about people empowerment. We need to equip our teams with the skills and autonomy and the mindset to adapt. As I've already said, a lot of people are resistant to change. So we need to empower our teams. We need to get them involved in any change or reinvention initiatives early on. We really need to help them understand what's in it for them. Most people resist change because there's some degree of fear attached to it. They're worried about what might happen to their job, their role, how things might change, and they definitely can't see what's in it for them. Why do they want to waste their time, energy, and resources putting in something that they don't think is going to benefit them? And in fact, this is just the exact conversation I've had with a client this morning before I come on to record this podcast. They need to put in some new systems into their business, but their people are already maxed out. So we were discussing about how do we get people's buy-in? How do we help people see that putting in this new system, whilst there will be some initial pain, the longer term gain is much more significant in that it will save them time and energy. It will actually make their job easier in the long term. But because we have this quite a myopic field of vision where we're just thinking about what do I need now, we can't see those opportunities in the longer term. So the fifth way that we start reinventing leadership is thinking about how the team collaborates. And we've got to remember that we need to move from hierarchies to networks of people, because we know this traditional hierarchical leadership no longer works. And teams today thrive in decentralized, agile, and purpose-driven environments. So here are some thoughts on how to reinvent your team structure. In the traditional team, we had a rigid hierarchy. In a reinvented and agile team, we've got flat, cross-functional collaboration. In traditional teams, we had fixed job roles. Nowadays, we need fluid roles based on strength and projects. And I might just want to signpost you here to the podcast we did when I interviewed Nathan Ott of the GC Index about find out where your team's energy for impact is, where their strengths are, what are the types of projects they're energized with, and give people those types of roles to do. In traditional teams, we had top-down decision-making. In the new world, we want to look at empowered and self-directed teams. One of the big problems with top-down decision-making is that we create bottlenecks within the business and nothing can move and be as agile and flexible as we need to be because we're waiting for one person to make a decision. So let's just empower our team members to make those decisions. And in traditional teams, in the past, we've had a lot of siloed departments. And in the new reinvented agile team framework, we've got cross-functional networks that work together. So something you might like to explore is how you could introduce something that I call reinvention labs. And these are teams dedicated to testing new ideas and processes and leadership styles in small controlled experiments. You know, we don't want to roll something out that might not work. So let's think about business as an experiment. How can we do something? Try it out, find out, take the learning. Did it work? Did it not work? What do we need to change? And finally, how about building a reinvention system and making change part of your daily operations? We need to bake reinvention into the DNA of the organization. So how do we do that? Here are a few ideas. You might want to create a reinvention budget and allocate resources specifically for innovation and experimentation. In business, we're all about KPIs. So we need to think about how do we measure what matters and think about tracking metrics that are beyond financials. And how could we track metrics such as agility, adaptability, and team engagement? We build our reinvention system by also celebrating failure, rewarding the learning and risk-taking and not just the results. And in order for this to happen, we have to develop a culture where there is a level of psychological safety that people feel happy to try something and know it's not going to work. And fourthly, we need to make learning non-negotiable. We've got to bake continuous learning into our daily work. Continual learning. This is about having a beginner's mindset, as Amy Edmondson puts it, recognizing that we never know everything. And when we've got this continual mindset, our appetite for learning, we don't fall into the fixed mindset, which says, I know how to do that. We stay curious about finding out what is new and what is new out there that we can learn. So again, you might want to think about, is there some kind of reinvention scorecard that you could implement within your business to track how often your team is experimenting, adapting, and learning from failure? So in summary, the future of leadership belongs, in my personal opinion, to reinventors, because the leaders of the future will not be the ones who hold on to outdated structures, methods, or mindsets. They'll be the ones that embrace change, continually reinvent, and lead with adaptability. So let's just summarize some of the things that we've spoken about today and some of the things that you can put in place to help you step into your role as a reinvention leader. And the first is that you might want to think about how you can adopt nature's reinvention cycles by scheduling seasonal leadership reviews. You might want to look at how you can use the Titanic Syndrome diagnostic to identify outdated leadership habits. You might want to experiment and empower your teams through reinvention labs. And think about how you can shift from the stability to agility by leading reinvention and not just change. And finally, how do we bake reinvention into the DNA of the business so that we are continually learning and innovating as part of our daily operations? Because reinvention isn't a one-time project, it's a way of life for 21st century leaders. And the question isn't whether or not you need to reinvent, but how fast can you start? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on how you're going to reinvent leadership for yourself personally and within your organization. Expect to see a lot more from me on this whole topic of reinvention down the road, because it's just fundamental to how we need to adapt to survive in the world going forward. So I'm super excited. I'm really excited to share a lot of my thoughts with you as we move forward on reinventing leadership, how we create high performance teams and how we do that as a leader. This is an incredible journey. We are at such an exciting point in the evolution of business. And I'm always for somebody who's a pioneer, just like you, a trailblazing leader who wants to be at the forefront of that new wave. And we have the perfect opportunity to do that if we're just open and ready to explore and be agile about what's possible. So I really hope you've enjoyed this edition of Impactful Teamwork, and I look forward to catching you again soon. Bye-bye.